3-4, functions. Some key vocabulary that you need to be aware of is that anytime we talk about input, we're talking about all the x values in an equation. It's also called the domain. The domain is a collection of all the x's. The input is all the x's, or sometimes it's inputs. It might be plural. Same thing over here with y's. All the y's are called the output or the range. Key vocabulary you need to know all means the same thing. What is a function? First of all, it's a rule. It's a math rule. Functions are written as equations. For instance, y equals 2x plus 3 is a function. It's written as an equation. Each input, each x value, has only one output. Now, this part is the hardest part to understand, and it's sort of the most important part. So I'm going to show you what this means. Okay, there are 3 different ways or 3 different kinds of problems that are going to ask you to decide whether or not it's a function. Okay? So, the first way is an input-output table. Remember, this is called an input-output table. All the x's are inputs, all the y's are outputs. So remember that kind of weird rule that says for each input there's only one output? So you look at all of your x's and you say, oh, every time I put in 2, I get 7. I don't get anything but 7. Every time I put in 0, I get 8. Every time I put in 3, I get 10. Every time I put in 1 into this function, I get 4. So is there only one output for each input? Yes. So this is a function. This is a function. Okay. Okay, look at the next example. Here's another input-output table. When I have 0, I get 6. When I have 1, I get 5. When I have 2, I get 4, and when I have 2, I get 3. Wait a minute. When I put in the number 2 for an input, I get 2 different outputs. To be a function, you have to only get one output for each input. So if I put 2 in, I get sometimes 4 and sometimes 3. That means this is not a function. Totally not a function. Not a function. Now, when you're looking at a table, an input-output table, it's pretty easy to see right away if something is a function. Because notice, in the x column, are any numbers repeated? No. In this x column, are any numbers repeated? So another way to look at this is, oh, this is repeated, those are different outputs, that's not a function, this is a function. Let's try another one. Now, look at these 3. 2 of these are functions. 1 is not a function. Remember, in a function, when you put a number in for x, you can only get one answer for y, never 2. So which one do you think is not a function? If you said this one, you would be correct. This is not a function. Why is it not a function? Because when I put in 6, sometimes I get 0 and sometimes I get 4. If I put the number 6 in, I get 2 different answers. The other 2 are functions. Now, it's bothering some of you probably that in this one there's a 3, 2 3's in the y's. Okay, that's okay. If I put in -2 and get 3, and I put in 4 and get 3, that's okay. Because it doesn't say I can't get the same answer in the y column. It says, for this number, I can't get 2 different answers. I'm only getting one answer for that number. And I'm getting one answer for this number. So, it doesn't matter if there's repeating in the y column. But if there's repeating in the x column, that means it's not a function because there's two different answers. This one obviously is a function. It doesn't have any repeating. So that will help you to look. So let's write this down. This is a function, yes. That's a function. This is not a function, and this one is a function. Okay? Now, here's the second way to tell if something is a function. It's called the vertical line test. This is super important and super easy. The vertical line test. You only use this when you have a graph. When it gives you a graph and it asks you to decide if it's a function, what you do is you look at the graph. Let's look at this first one. And you say, if I put a vertical line anywhere on this graph, a vertical line, does it touch more than one point on the graph? Now the yellow line is the graph. We're looking at just the yellow line. If I was to write a vertical line anywhere on this graph, would it touch more than one spot on the yellow line? No. So that means it's a function. It passed the vertical line test. Okay, this one is a function. Now let's look at the other one, the pink curvy line, which is actually called a parabola. Okay, if I run a vertical line on this graph, does it touch the pink parabola in more than one spot at a time? Well, yeah, look, here's a vertical line. It touches here and here. Vertical line touches 2 points. That means it's not a function. To be a function, you can only touch 1 point with any vertical line. If you touch 2 points with any vertical line, you're not a function. So this one is not a function. The vertical line test is really easy and simple when you have a graph. Okay, here's two more graphs. Use the vertical line test. One of these is a function, one is not. What did you pick? This one is not a function. Because when I run a vertical line, oh, I just hit 3 points. Look at that. 3 points here, everywhere. Okay? This one is a function. When I run a vertical line, I only touch 1 point on the graph at a time. So this one is a function. Okay, the third kind of problem. It's going to ask you, is this a function? They're going to give you an equation. And you're going to have to decide if it's a function. The only real way to find out if it's a function is to graph it. So you make an input-output table and you choose the x's. I would stick close to 0 when I choose x's because sometimes if you choose big numbers for x's, you get big answers for y and they don't fit well on your graph. So stick close to 0. You need to choose 5 points. So go -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. That's sticking close to 0. Okay, if I put -2 in for x, I get -2 plus 2, that's 0. If I put -1 in for x, I'm going to get 1 for y. If I put 0 in for x, I get 2. 1 in for x gives me 3, and 2 in for x gives me 4. Sticking close to 0, then I have to graph it. Now, I'm just going to guess at my graph since I have no lines on my thing. So I'm going to say, well, -2, 0 is about there. -1, 1 is about there. 0, 2, about there. 1, 3, 2, 4. If you were doing this for homework, you would use graph paper. You're not allowed to guess. And then I would connect this because equations are lines. Then I would say, oh, that's a function. Vertical line test works. So that's definitely a function. Here's your first part of video homework. Second part of video homework. Last part of video homework. Have a lovely evening.